This is the official courtroom testimony from Day 14 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. The gallery hadn't even recovered from Brad Pitt's explosive revelations the day before, when the judge dropped a name that turned the entire courtroom ice cold. Heads snapped. Gasps exploded. Tom Cruise, the action icon, the symbol of Hollywood power. But he wasn't here to flash a smile. He walked in not as Ethan Hunt, not as Maverick, but as a broken man ready to expose a nightmare Hollywood wanted buried forever. This wasn't PR. This wasn't a movie. This was war. What Cruise revealed next. Dark, secret basement rituals. Not alone. With names that shattered the room. Tom Hanks, Jim Carrey, Steve Harvey, and more. Nude spiritual cleansing. Forced silence. Manipulation so deep it drove him into Scientology. Not for belief, but for protection. This wasn't testimony. This was a detonation. The energy inside the courtroom shifted. Even seasoned press looked shaken. The judge leaned into the mic, like even he was bracing himself. "All rise for the next witness," the bailiff said. And then he walked in. Tom Cruise, dark navy suit, no tie, no expression, no performance. The temperature dropped like a freezer door had just opened. A woman in the second row gasped. One juror gripped their notepad like it might fly away. Cruise raised his hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat. His voice? Not Hollywood, not rehearsed, just cold, controlled, terrified. "I came here today," he began, "not to make headlines, but to finally say what I buried for years." He recalled first meeting Diddy at a party in Cannes, 2004. Said Diddy praised his public image, called him a master of perception. Said they could help each other. Then came more meetups. L.A. Miami. But Cruise said something felt off. The vibe shifted. It wasn't about films. It wasn't about music. It was about private gatherings. Then the first invite. A weekend retreat at Diddy's mansion. Cruise said Diddy promised only the elite, total safety, and silence. Tom's voice dropped. I agreed, and that moment was the start of something manufactured. He paused, locked eyes with Diddy, and what came next was ice. What I saw in that house, what I became part of, even without agreeing, destroyed something in me. And now, the truth's coming out. The judge didn't blink. The prosecutor leaned forward. The jury, frozen. Tom Cruise, the last person anyone thought would speak, took a deep, broken breath. "It started in the basement," he said, "and it started with a bath." Tom Cruise's tone didn't shift as he began recounting what happened in Diddy's basement, but the courtroom felt it. The shift in atmosphere, the weight of every word, even the stenographer's hand slowed. It wasn't just a basement. Cruise said it was something else, something designed. He described entering through a thick mahogany door hidden behind a sliding bookshelf. 2 security guards stood silently on either side. He was told to remove his shoes and follow a narrow staircase lit only by dim wall sconces. At the bottom, Cruise recalled, you could hear the water before you saw it. The room itself, Cruise said, was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was cold and tiled in black and green marble. In the center, a massive tub large enough to fit 6 or more people steamed gently under a soft blue light. But it wasn't just the size or heat that disturbed him. It was the silence, he said. No one spoke, not even in whispers. And everyone in that room, they were people you'd recognize. He paused. I saw. Tom Hanks, Jim Carrey, Steve Harvey, and others I won't name yet. He said Diddy appeared wearing a silk robe, barefoot, holding a small ceramic bowl filled with bath salts. He approached each guest, handed them a black towel, and whispered a phrase. Cruise remembered. Verbatim. Leave what burdens you in the water. Cruise said he thought it was metaphorical until he realized no one was leaving. We sat there, naked, not talking. The only sounds were the dripping of water, the hum of hidden speakers playing ambient music, and the occasional movement of someone shifting in the tub. Each participant was told to close their eyes and let the energy align. Cruz testified that someone, a man he didn't recognize, walked the perimeter of the room, lighting a thick herbal incense that made him feel dizzy. He said time stopped, and that the experience wasn't sexual. Not overtly, but it was something else entirely. It felt like submission. Cruz said it felt like being stripped of identity. When the bath ended, Diddy approached him again. "You're part of it now," he told Cruz. "Now you understand." And Tom Cruise knew even then that something about his life had changed, and not for the better. The courtroom was still reeling from Tom Cruise's vivid description of the basement baths when he leaned closer to the mic and said something that caught everyone off guard. "That experience," he began, "is the real reason." "I turned to Scientology," gasps murmured through the gallery. Even the judge raised his eyebrows slightly. Cruz continued, his voice unwavering. "The public believes I joined Scientology out of spiritual yearning, or because of Hollywood influence." That's a half-truth. The full truth is, I needed protection, not from the media, not from the public, from him. He pointed at Diddy. I realized after that night in the basement that I was being pulled into something, a pattern, a lifestyle, a system. I didn't fully understand, but felt designed to trap me. He said, after the first bath ritual, Diddy began calling him frequently. Not about music, not about business, always under the guise of needing emotional release or inviting him to rebalance the energy. He'd say things like, "Don't go chasing fake power when you've already bathed in the real thing." I didn't know what to make of that. I still don't. Cruz described how each time he pulled away, strange things would happen. Unfounded rumors would pop up in the press. Personal assistants would quit without warning. He began receiving packages at his home, items from the bath nights, scented oils, tiny vials of bath water, and cryptic notes like, "Still soaked in silence." That's when I realized it wasn't just weird. Cruz said it was targeted. It was surveillance. It was control. By 2005, he reached out to a high-ranking official in the Church of Scientology. "I told them I needed a wall." He said, "They didn't even ask who, they just said, 'We understand.'" The courtroom sat in stunned silence as Cruz revealed internal documents showing he had fast-tracked his immersion into Scientology's upper ranks, claiming he needed full audit protection. I wasn't just looking for spiritual guidance. Cruz said I was hiding. Scientology gave me what no one else could: secrecy shielding and a place Diddy couldn't reach. He paused, voice steady. "I joined Scientology to escape Shaw Combs." And that was when everyone realized this wasn't just testimony, it was confession. Tom Cruise leaned back slightly in the witness stand, his gaze distant as if revisiting memories buried beneath years of silence. The courtroom was frozen in rapt attention. Then he continued. "After I pulled away from Diddy, I thought it was over," he said, "but it never really ended. He began receiving anonymous packages, always small, always unmarked. Inside, black towels embroidered with the word "cleanse," bottles of bath oil in the same scent Diddy used in the basement. Once a single rose submerged in murky water arrived in a sealed jar with no note. I didn't tell anyone, Cruz admitted. Not my team, not my family. I just kept them in a box. I still have them. Then came the phone calls, always from blocked numbers. The voices were disguised, filtered, robotic. One call he remembered vividly. The voice said, "You may wear the mask of a church, Tom, but I know what's underneath." The courtroom tensed. Cruz said he began living in a state of paranoia. I couldn't tell if it was real or psychological. That's how it works. Diddy doesn't threaten you directly. He lingers in your shadow. He described an incident in 2008 when he was shooting a film overseas. His hotel suite was pristine, except for one thing. In the bathroom, a black towel lay folded on the edge of the tub. The concierge claimed it was a mistake. Cruz knew better. "You have to understand," he told the court. "This wasn't about affection or obsession. This was about ownership." He needed to remind me. He still had a part of me. Cruz said it took years to realize how deep the conditioning ran. I avoided water rituals, I stopped using candles, I threw out every robe I owned. I was erasing parts of my life just to feel free again." He paused, then added, "But I was never truly free because I never spoke it aloud." His voice lowered until now, and with those words, the courtroom understood that what Cruz had endured wasn't just coercion, it was haunting. An invisible chain he'd worn in silence for almost 2 decades. Tom Cruise sat forward, elbows on the stand, voice dropping to a low, calculated rhythm. "It wasn't just me," he said, eyes scanning the courtroom. "There were others, dozens of them, maybe more." He began to describe what he called Did's circle of control. These gatherings weren't spontaneous, they were scheduled, orchestrated. Everyone had a role, even if they didn't know it. Cruz detailed the strange protocol of Diddy's ritual parties. Upon arrival, guests were stripped of their phones and watches. They were handed contracts, NDA-style documents printed on thick black paper signed in silver ink. The clauses, Cruz said, were vague, poetic, almost. One of them read, "What enters water stays in silence." The gatherings always followed a 3-part structure. Cleansing, silence, confession. Each person would sit in the tub, light incense, and whisper something they were ashamed of into the steam. Diddy would listen. Sometimes he'd record it, sometimes he'd repeat it back. That was his game. Cruz said shame was his currency. He recalled one night in particular, sometime in 2006, he had walked into the ritual room and saw someone already inside. He was a comedian, one of the biggest names in the world. I won't say his name, but he was crying, naked, kneeling in the water, and Diddy was just sitting there watching. Cruz said these gatherings weren't about sex or pleasure. They were about exposure, about power. Everyone left a little more hollow than they arrived. He claimed Diddy used the information collected during these events as leverage. He'd call people weeks later and reference their confessions. "Don't forget what you said in the steam," he'd say, "or I still have the tape if you want to talk." Brave. Cruz said it was like a cult, but worse because no one believed they were in it until it was too late. He looked directly at Diddy. "You didn't offer connection. You offered control. You bathed people in silence and called it healing." The room remained silent. No one moved. Even Diddy had gone. Still eyes locked forward, expression unreadable. And Tom Cruise, still seated, still speaking, was far from finished. Tom Cruise took a slow breath and shifted his weight in the witness chair. His next words carried a colder edge, no longer drenched in confusion or reflection, but marked by realization. The rituals stopped being gatherings. He said they became assignments. He explained how after several months of distancing himself, Diddy attempted to reel him back in with what he called an invitation of honor. Cruz declined, but what happened next disturbed him. "Far more than anything prior, I received a box inside a white card. No writing, just a single fingerprint in wax pressed in the center, and below it a photo." He paused. "It was me, sleeping taken from outside my bedroom window." The courtroom reacted audibly. Whispers erupted. The judge demanded silence, but the tension had cracked the air open like a lightning strike. That's when I knew Cruz continued. This wasn't about a friendship gone sour. This was about punishment and preservation. He was letting me know I couldn't outrun him. Cruz revealed that he hired private security for the first time in his career. He moved homes, changed numbers, had his personal team undergo full background sweeps. Yet the strange encounters didn't stop. I'd hear his name at events I never expected. I'd spot people I remembered from those bath nights suddenly popping up at press junkets, parties, even church events. People I'd never seen in the industry before, but who somehow always knew my schedule. The most disturbing moment, he said, happened in 2010 during a rap party for Mission. Impossible ghost protocol. While thanking guests in a private suite, a waiter handed him a drink and whispered in his ear, "Did he misses you?" Cruz said he froze. I turned. The man was gone. He asked the staff who the waiter was. No one recognized him. He wasn't on the payroll. He wasn't hired. He was just there. Cruz said the harassment continued until he made a final quiet deal through intermediaries to ensure distance. They called it a truce. I called it a warning. He stared directly at Diddy. You created a culture of silence, and I let it live too long. And as he sat back, the courtroom sat in full awareness. Tom Cruise hadn't escaped Diddy's orbit. He'd been orbiting the trauma in silence until now. Tom Cruise's voice lowered to a near whisper, forcing the courtroom to lean in to listen harder. What scared me most, he said, wasn't what happened to me. It was what I started to notice happening to others. He paused, eyes darkening with memory. There were people, young, talented, hungry, being pulled in same script, same ritual, same basement, but this time they weren't protected like I was. They didn't have lawyers, they didn't have Scientology, they just had hope, and Diddy fed on that. He described meeting a young actor on the rise, a kid Cruise had taken under his wing briefly during a studio mentoring initiative. He was smart, nervous, reminded me of myself. Cruise said he introduced the actor to a few Hollywood contacts, gave him some advice. Then, one day, he disappeared. Cruise found out weeks later the actor had been spotted at one of Diddy's retreats. When I finally heard from him again, his voice was different, like he wasn't there anymore. He just said, "Thanks for everything, Tom, but I'm good now. I see the path." He never acted again. Cruise said this wasn't an isolated case. It was happening to musicians, to influencers, even to assistants. 1 minute, they were rising. The next, they were ghosts. He clenched his jaw. That's when I started tracking it. I had a former intelligence contractor help me map connections, flights, party lists, NDAs. Every single event that Diddy hosted had a pattern. Same guests, same disappearances. He submitted those logs into evidence. Cruise testified that he contacted 3 major studios anonymously at first to warn them about what he called the Bath Network. They didn't want to hear it. One executive told me, "You're not the first person to say this, but you're the first one crazy enough to bring it to court." He looked dead into the camera, unblinking, voice steady. "Well, I'm here. Call me crazy, but this ends now." The courtroom froze, not because they were shocked, but because everyone in that room finally realized the truth. This wasn't about tabloid drama. This was about ritual. This was about a predator hiding in plain sight. And this was about exposure. Tom Cruise clasped his hands slowly, his face still but burning with something deeper. A man shedding decades of silence, trading fear for fury. His voice hardened, like iron forged from shame. "There's one night," he began, his tone razor-sharp, "that I've never spoken about. Not to my advisors, not to my security, not even to the church, because I was ashamed of how I reacted." The room tensed as he revealed what sounded more like the setup to a psychological thriller than a memory. It was early 2012. The location, an ultra-private estate tucked deep in the hills of Mulholland, isolated, camera-proof, and crawling with secrecy. It wasn't one of Diddy's usual playground parties, Cruise continued. It was darker. He called it a renewal night. He paused. The words hung in the air like poison. He said it was a way to cleanse our pasts and recommit to the code. The code, the kind that binds, silences, and breaks. Tom hadn't been to one of these elite gatherings in years. He believed he was out. He thought he was free. But they pulled him back in, not with threats, with precision. The invitation? A white envelope, hand-delivered, no return address, no name, just an old photo. Tom and Diddy in 2005, smiling at a party, and one chilling handwritten line, "You still owe me one last dip." He tossed it, tried to forget. But on the night of the gathering, everything moved like clockwork, as if someone had hacked into his life. His driver received silent instructions. His security team stood down, no questions. Clearances appeared, barriers vanished. It was like someone had overridden every firewall I'd spent years building around myself. Near midnight, he arrived. The mansion was pitch black from the outside, but inside, only blue lighting, eerie, cold, surgical. Each seat had a robe, clean, pressed, waiting. In the center of the room, a bath, but not a bath, a massive Roman-style circle, ritualistic, unnatural. Others were already seated, quiet, familiar faces, some blurred by shadows. He didn't name them. Then Diddy walked in last, in white. Not a word. Instead, he pressed a button. A recording began to play. It was all our voices, Cruz said. Confessions, whispers, fears, regrets. Mine. Everyone's. Things we said at past events. Things we didn't even remember saying. One by one, people cried. Not from pain, but because they realized Diddy had kept everything. All the secrets, all the guilt, all the leverage. He didn't just host those nights. He recorded them. He stored them. And then he reminded us. We no longer owned our truths. He did. The bath was filled. People began stepping in like obedient cultists. Tom didn't. I walked out, and I swore I would never come back. Because that night I realized this wasn't just ritual, it was blackmail disguised as redemption. His eyes locked with the jury. One by one. He wasn't afraid anymore. Then came the hammer blow. Diddy doesn't collect people, Cruz said, voice dropping to a whisper. He collects obedience. He laid it all out. A web of assistants, stylists, trainers, extras, normal people across Hollywood who weren't just loyal. They were planted, embedded. They showed up when needed, vanished just as fast. Say his name, they flinch. Question him, they vanish. I've seen directors disappear off projects after one disagreement, artists blacklisted overnight, contracts burned in back rooms. And then came the moment that shattered him. Tom was on set. Just another scene. A crew member handed him a prop, harmless, nothing unusual. But on the handle, in faded ink, were 5 words, still wet from the last bath. The courtroom gasped. That was the moment I cracked, he confessed. I left the set, went home, and opened a storage unit I hadn't touched in 10 years. Inside were gifts, towels, robes, letters, every sick reminder of that life. I burned them all. Except for one thing, the contract, the original NDA, the very first ceremonial agreement, signed by Tom, signed by Diddy, and one more signature, redacted. He submitted it into evidence. As it was displayed, the room went still. The silver signatures shimmered under the courtroom lights. Clause 13. Ceremonial confidentiality. This wasn't just legal, Tom said, his voice tightening. It was spiritual, symbolic, sinister. Then, with a fire that left no room for doubt, this isn't revenge. I'm not trying to save my career. I'm here because staying silent is no longer survival. It's surrender, and I'm done surrendering. The judge called for recess. But no one moved, not a soul. Because on day 14 of the Diddy trial, Tom Cruise didn't just testify. He set Hollywood on fire with the kind of truth bomb that will echo through the industry for decades. And this time, there's no unhearing it, no unseeing it, and definitely no going back.